Welcome to Day of Victory Ministries. I am so glad to be in your living room or in your kitchen or by internet again today. And I'm so glad that I have a guest with us again today, and her name is Sandra Spencer. And as I often tell you, that Day of Victory is a taste of diversity, and we like having people to come who will give their testimony, their journey, their story of what God has done in their life, because we haven't always been saved. And so with that being said, I just want to welcome Sandra Spencer and begin the conversation about what God has done in her life. But she'll talk to us a little bit from her past and bringing us up to the present time.
Yes.
Welcome, Sandra.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
It's been a long time, like this song. It's been a long time coming, but you're well worth the wait. You are well worth the wait.
Thank you so
Praise
much.
God. Well, tell us a little bit about your journey. I do know a little bit of it, but I would like for you to share it with it. Both of us are in the same church. You used to be Faith and Victory years ago,
Yes.
and now it's since what, 2008, I think it's Re-Image Church.
Right.
But you were there and you moved away for a while, and now you're back again. So give us a little bit of history.
I certainly will. So, yes, I came to Faith and Victory Church as a college student.
Okay.
I was very excited and was very involved in the church, worked in the children's ministry, and I met my then husband in this area. We got married at Faith and Victory Church, and we had our first child. So I'm really excited about, to tell you, you may not remember this, but I was pregnant with my first child on the day of your wedding.
No.
And my baby was due June 26th. So I had already said, I won't be at your wedding in July and come July 4th, I was still pregnant. So I was able to come to your wedding, but I was very pregnant. So anyway.
I had forgotten that.
Yes,
Yes,
absolutely.
yes.
I always have fond memories of that. It was so hot and I was so big.
It was the 4th of July.
Yes,
Isn't
the
that
4th of
something?
July, and I was...
Who does that
Exactly.
to your friends?
But it was wonderful, wonderful. So it was a blessing. So I got married in 2000. 1983, I believe it was. And my husband and I were members of the church, and we both were involved in different ministries throughout Faith and Victory. But my husband was in the military. He was in National Guard. And so right about the time when I was pregnant with my second child, he was deployed. Back then it was Desert Shield and Desert Storm.
Yes.
So he got deployed to the military, and he served there for, such a long time. My son was born, and it was a long time where we kind of had to do it alone for a little bit without our father in the home. So when he returned from the war, just like a lot of men back then, he really suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. But in the mid-'80s, it was not something that the military recognized.
They just sent him on
They
back?
sent him back home. They didn't offer any kind of treatment, any kind of education to us as spouses. And so he really did come back with a lot of issues. And it really showed up within our marriage.
And that changed the dynamics of your family, of your relationship prior to the time when he wasn't
Absolutely.
deployed.
Exactly. So
you
we had a wonderful relationship, wonderful marriage. We were really getting along very well. So I didn't realize what was going on with him. And he would have night terrors. And he would tell me of some of the horrific things that he had seen, while he was away. And it was very traumatic. But over time, he started to grow worse, and he displayed temper. He displayed very agitated, easily agitated. And so it would kind of come and go, and we would pray for him and just think things were going to get better. We moved, we bought our own home, and we thought that he was getting a lot better. but then it just got worse. And so by now I'm pregnant with child number 3.
Mm-hmm.
And so he started to get verbally abusive, and then that winged over to some physical abuse. And one night, I just never knew what was going to set him up. And sometimes it was nothing in the home. It could have been a bad day at work. It could have been just anything. But one particular night, he was so angry about something, and he threatened my life. And he had a machete that he had brought back from the military, and I knew that that machete was in that house, and he threatened to go get it, and that was going to be the end of me. So I left in the middle of the night. I grabbed my 2 children, and I put them in my car, and I almost made it out the door with them, and he woke up and heard us. And so I drove off out of the driveway. And it's probably 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and he literally chased me around the city of Greenville. I'm driving, he's driving behind me. So I decided I probably should just drive to a police station for my safety. And so somewhere in the city of Greenville, I lost him. And I think he may have figured out that I was headed to the police station. So went to a friend's house. Thank God she let us in. I went to bed. But after that point, I just had nowhere to go. And so I called on the church for help. And, I stayed with friends for a little while. And then finally someone kind of connected me with a shelter for women who had been abused or whatever. And I was accepted into the shelter with my children, and I'm pregnant, And it just wasn't a good place to be. And I remember one night going to bed and felt something on my leg and woke up. It was the biggest, ugliest spider you'd ever seen.
Don't like spiders.
You hate spiders like I do?
Yes.
Yes.
No.
But it bit me on the leg. So woke up the next morning, my leg was just big and swollen, so I had to go to the emergency room, and it was a poisonous spider, so they had to...
Again, okay, so, and you had your children with you?
2 children.
And so you had to take your children to the hospital?
Yes, and pregnant. My doctor went to Faith and Victory, Dr. Satterfield.
I remember.
Yes, and he heard my story, so he would treat me free of charge. I just go in, and the nurses knew me, and so
that was favor from God.
Wonderful, wonderful. So anyway, so after I left the shelter because I was afraid to be there. It wasn't clean, and so I was in my car, and by now I was ashamed.
Let me stop you right there. Ashamed, feeling bad, feeling guilty, and things of that nature, and not having really shared anything with anyone else at church, right?
Not at church, and not to my parents, who I believe would have gotten in a car.
And come to get you.
And they would have come and gotten me.
But the shame is what?
The shame.
Address that.
Yes, because I was the first person in my family to go to college and graduate from college. I had been a teacher in Pitt County schools, had a level of success, but in my marriage, we decided that I would be a stay-at-home mom and raise our children. I homeschooled my kids for a while, and so like I said, you go along and then life happens. It takes a turn that you don't expect. And so the enemy will cause that shame as if I had done something. And I thought I had done something. I just thought I'm being punished. Maybe I wasn't a good enough wife. Maybe I didn't do enough. So I finally got to a point where I really had to tell somebody, and I went to my church family, and they really, really helped me out. And some anonymous donor, somebody, rented a mobile home for us to live in for a while. And I was just ecstatic. I had never lived in a mobile home, but to me, when you're out in the street or living in a car and you have 2 kids and you're pregnant, you were happy. And it was furnished, and I was so happy. So my still husband at the time, he couldn't find us, and he was just living, and he kind of reported me to social services and told them that I was living on the street with his children.
Oh,
And so they figured out that I was in a mobile home, and so they came to do a home study because they wanted to really figure out if I had the ability to take care of my kids. At that same time, being pregnant, I had gotten preeclampsia and just was sick and then needed bed rest. So I was just fearful that they would come and think I couldn't take care of my kids and that, So, but that didn't happen. They came and they found that everything was okay.
And did you at that time divulge what actually had happened with your now used to be husband?
Yes, they knew all of that, and so that was kind of open and closed. I was just so glad that that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Right, and so I finally realized that I was going to have to get some more help. So for the first time in my life, I had to go to social services and apply for public housing. I had to apply for food stamps. I had to apply for Medicaid. And at that time, this is, you had to stand in line for everything. You had to make appointments and you had to be there all day long. You had children who were hungry and tired. And I remember the stares. I remember people looking at me. Here this woman coming in here to ask for help with 2 children and pregnant and no husband in sight.
And what was that doing to you?
That was really, I can't even imagine what people feel like now because I felt so low. I felt so
and here
humiliated.
You are. And here you are, a woman with an education, but regardless of whether you had or had not, the fact is that there are others that sometimes they feel just
like it doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
Because when you're in that line, we're all equal. And people are looking at you and wondering, how'd you get here? And there were social workers that I knew. They knew I was a part of Pitt County Schools, and they looked at me like, what are you doing here? And so that was really difficult. At the same time, my son, he was now about 3 or 4, and he was starting to have some real serious issues. I didn't know what they were. I just thought, well, he doesn't have his dad. He's going through, and he was doing things that first I thought was just typical for a 4-year-old little boy. And I would take him to the doctor, and they would say, oh, he's just active. And they would say, just, give him a little bit more structure. And I did all the things they told me to do, and it just didn't work. And finally, his pediatrician sent him to see a therapist. And then they decided that there was really something not quite right with him. And so there was a preschool that they had here in Greenville that was for kids who had some kind of special needs, and it was a preschool to hopefully help them get ready for kindergarten. And so they put him in this preschool, and the preschool had on-site child psychologists and on-site people so that they could help meet the needs of the child. And so he went to this preschool while he was about 4, and that really helped me out because now I was homeschooling my oldest daughter and still pregnant. I actually went job hunting, pregnant, and wonder why nobody would hire me, Linda.
and I'm laughing with you now because when you say that, you're thinking, why wouldn't it?
I have an education. I can do this.
I can do this.
Yeah.
I can do this. But no one wants to take
a woman
who is pregnant because
in a few weeks I'm going to go on maternity leave.
And they're thinking that they're still going to be responsible for
all of that. They're going to have to pay me. They're going to have to give me health benefits. So they're seeing all of the
negative,
and they weren't looking at my skills and ability and my experience. So
and your need.
Yes, and my need.
Because tell me, you would talk to them open, transparent.
Yes.
I'm a mother. I pretty much. I'm just. I need a job so that I can be able to take care of my family.
I did, and I pleaded with people about that. So I had to stay on public assistance until after I had my child. I just couldn't get a job. So in the meantime, my son, he really started to get worse. And so when I went to register him for kindergarten and get my other daughter into school, because I was going to have to put them in school because I was going to have to go to work once the baby was born. So the baby was born and everything, and just one thing I want to tell you though, when I went in labor with my third child, I had already decided to name her Grace, because it was the absolute grace of God that was kind of carrying us. But I had seeped into such a depression during that time, because I mean, everything was a struggle, trying to make sure the kids were fed and had clothes, and, you know, just every day, and just doing it alone. It was just new to me. So the day that I went to put him in kindergarten, get him registered, I was told that he couldn't attend kindergarten in Pitt County schools because they didn't have a program that could meet his special needs.
And that was back in what year was that?
He was born in 1990, so this was probably 1996 when he was starting kindergarten. And so they had an alternative for me. And they wanted to put him in a residential treatment facility. And he was just 6, starting kindergarten, maybe 5. And I just broke down thinking, what? And they had to get special permission, because he, at that time, would have been the youngest kid to ever enter into this residential treatment facility. 5 days a week he'd be in this facility. And I thought, somebody else is going to mother him and put him to bed at night and read to him and pray over him.
Right.
You know, and so
this is my child.
Yes, my child. And I was basically said, then you have to keep him at home. I said, but I have to go to work. You know, so he went to this residential facility.
I know your heart was breaking.
It was broken. His siblings, the sisters, we didn't know, and I felt like I was deserting him. I felt like, oh my God, I have given up on my child, and I hadn't. And so he stayed there for quite a while, and he did have some significant issues, and so he was in treatment. And so as time went on, I was able to kind of go back to work, and but just a lot of things just kept happening. It just seemed like I would go a little bit forward and get knocked back. So we moved several times. I mean, I moved in this house. I was so excited. I had gotten kind of out of public housing and was able to rent a home finally. And so we rented this house in Farmville, and it was a 3-bedroom house. And so by this time, my son was going to school during the day, and then sometimes he would spend at the residential, and he could come home on weekends. So things were starting to get better, and so we rented this house, and it was 3-bedroom brick house in Farmville, and I was just so excited. And one night we would go to church on Sunday and Wednesday night Bible study. So one night we came home from Bible study on Wednesday, and it was dark, and we pulled up in the driveway, and we would enter through the kitchen. Went in the kitchen and flipped the light on. Linda, the entire kitchen, there were rats everywhere. Do you hear me? People say they were mice, but I say they were rats.
I don't remember that part of your story.
You don't remember that part. So the kids we're screaming. So I'm up on my bed. I'm standing on my bed, and the kids are. We're screaming because we run to the other one, and we see them scurrying.
Oh my goodness!
And so while I'm screaming, my phone rings. So I pick up the phone. So it's a man that I work with, and he hears me. He says, "What's wrong?" So I says, "There's mice all over my house, and we're screaming." And he hears the kids. We're crying and screaming. He said, "Go get in your car. Just go get back in your car." You know. Now, no cell phones.
Right.
So this is a house phone. I can't take it to the car with me. He said, "I want you to get in your car." He said, "Is there a Hilton Hotel in Greenville?" I'm like, "Yeah." He said, "I want you to drive to the Hilton Hotel. Just drive to the Hilton Hotel, go in and tell them your name." Thinking, okay, so we got in the car, we drove to, this man had gotten us a room. So the next day, you know, I didn't know what to do, and someone said, call the health department. So we did. So they went out to the house and they condemned the house. So what had happened was this house, the owner had built this house themselves, the family had. And there was a cornfield in the back of the house. Harvest season. And
because
they were field mice.
Because at the time that you first moved in there,
It was summer. It was nice, hot, and then fall came in. And the pipes weren't insulated. There were so many entry points into that house. Mm-hmm. But the thing that got me was the owner of the house knew that in the fall that would happen. And he knew that I moved in there with 3 young children.
Oh.
So this is what they had to do. They had to send a crew. They have a method. So they send these people to your house, and they have a truck, and they have all these containers. Mm-hmm. And they shake every piece of clothing, and they take every little thing, and when they pack the container, it goes right out to the truck. All the clothes go to a cleaning facility. And it was at the owner's expense. And so they moved me into, I found another place and moved into another place, and his whatever paid for us to stay at that hotel for a few days until they got all this done. Mm-hmm. So I rented another home. And I got in another home, and I said, we are home. Thank God I had to change the children's school, because now we're moving back to Greenville. And getting another home, and it's just wonderful. I'm so glad to be in this home. The homeowner, beautiful. I know I hadn't been in that home but probably a year when the homeowner came to me and said he had gotten remarried, and he and his wife were moving to Raleigh, and he was going to sell the house. Oh. He said, you can buy the house. I thought, I'm just starting out. I couldn't buy the house, but So, oh my goodness, we had to move again. So we moved to a townhouse. Right behind Beef Barn and Walmart. But there was a little set of townhouses.
That's no longer here.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. But there's a little set of townhouses, mm-hmm. and we moved in a townhouse. And now life is good. I changed the kids' school again. Got them in another school district. Now my son's doing a little better. He's in public school, and so now I'm settling down again. And so I still had a job. I was working through mental health at the time. But my particular job allowed me to work from home. So I didn't have the after-school child care expenses. And so I was thinking, God, life is so good. Mm-hmm. Oh, and I just was rejoicing. So one day I'm at home working, and the kids are at school. And I get a knock on the door. I open the door, it's the sheriff. And he said, ma'am, he said, I have to put this eviction notice on your door, and you have 30 days to be out. And I was like, what? No, I paid my rent every month. And I had it. I had my check stubs. I had everything. Mm-hmm. I said, I paid my rent every month on time. I have never been late. He said, no, ma'am. He said, you have paid your rent. And he said, the rental agency gave me the report. But the man who owns this house has not paid his mortgage in over 6 months. And the bank has foreclosed on this house.
Oh, my God. Okay. What's going through your mind? Because what you're telling me, this one thing after another, after another. And audience, you hear this, so there may be some of you that may not have experienced exactly what Sandra Spencer has experienced, but you're listening to her story, her journey, and each time when you think that you have arrived and gotten something settled, then something else happens. And you're a Christian.
Yes.
And you're
thinking serving and praying and mm-hmm. living the best life for God I know how to do. Uh-huh. So when he shut that door, I remember falling right to my knees and just crying, saying, God, what am I going to do? Mm-hmm. Oh, and then that big note on my door. They nail it onto your door.
Big yellow and black writing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Back in the day.
And it has the date that you have to be out. So I'm just sobbing. Then another knock comes to the door. I get up, I open the door again. And it's the same sheriff officer. He said, ma'am, you are not allowed to remove this paper from the store. It's against the law for you to remove this paper from the door. And I said, okay, sir, I won't remove it. He said, but I'm not going to come back and check. And nobody in my department is going to come back and check. He said, and I can't tell you what to do, but nobody's going to come check. He he heard me. He said, I heard you crying. He said, and you said, what am I going to do when my children come home? When that school bus stops in front of my door and my kids get ready to get off that bus and there's an eviction notice on the door. And so when he got ready to walk away, he said, what you decide to do with that note on your door is up to you. But we're not going to come back and check. So when he left, I took that
note down.
I did not want my kids to come home.
And you didn't want them to be embarrassed
when that school bus, and it's just big, and you know how bright it was.
Yes. I do.
Yes.
Because I've different clients.
So I just cried and cried and cried. And so the next day, this is how the hand of God works. So the next day I have to run an errand. A young man that went to Faith and Victory with us, Steve Evans, a realtor. And we in the store. I'm telling him what happened. And he said, what? And I said, I've moved so many times and taken my children from school to school. Every time they get settled, He says, why don't you buy a house? And I kind of giggled.
I know you did.
Oh, yeah, sure.
It's really right.
And he said, so you're a Christian. You believe God. He could give you a house? And I thought, well. And he said, you could be he explained a lot of the logistical things to me. And then he said, but if we do this, we're going to do this. It's going to be a walk of faith. He said, you may get to a lot of no's before you get to a yes. And I decided we're going to do this because I was tired of moving my kids from place to place. And in between all of these moving, from house to house and place to place, my kids were starting to have issues and problems. And my oldest daughter had to write a paper one day. And I don't know what the title of this paper was, but she wrote this paper. And it just so happened, cleaning her room, I found the essay that she wrote.
She wrote it. Had she already submitted it to school?
And she got a good grade on it. She was an excellent writer. She still is an excellent writer. But in her paper, she said, there was something like, what is the hardest thing you've done? Something. It was some story that she had to write. And she said that she didn't have any friends and that she moved from school to school. And that in her paper, she said, we have moved 7 times since I started kindergarten. And she was only in like 5th grade. And I said, no, we haven't moved 7 times. Why would she write that? So I sat down and I said, so we're there. Oh my goodness, I have had to move my children 7 times. It was just so hard on her. And she talked about how nobody liked her and she didn't like her life. And I didn't realize how much of a toll it was taking on my kids. And so I called Mr. Evans back. I said, we're going to get a house. I'm going to put my kids somewhere stable because we're not going to keep doing this. But when I moved again, I was going to probably have to switch schools again, So I remember the first bank we went to and talked to the man and filled out the papers, and he laughed.
In your face?
He laughed. And I walked out and I said, no, I'm not going to do this, but I said, I need to do this. And I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 times we went to brokers and bankers until we went to this one man and talked to him, and he ran the numbers, and he kept shaking his head, and he said, my mom was a Christian, and she was a single mom. He said, somebody gave her a chance. He said, I'm going to give you a chance. He said, don't you let me down. He said, because my bosses, they're going to wonder why I approved this loan. And he gave me a loan.
Praise God. We're going to stop right there. And I know that you wanting to, as my audience, wanting to hear the rest of the story, and you will. I just want to say thank you, Sandra, thus far for being so transparent, because there's so many in our community that have so many different things that are going on. And of course, I knew a little bit, but I had no idea to the depth of it, because you had some real close-knit friends that would know a little bit more. But I want you to come back, audience, on the next week, and what I want to do is give Sandra an opportunity to continue this, and so we can still bring it up to date of where she is now. And then I also want you to, I know that I had asked you ahead of time to bring a message of hope, because with all the tragedy, with all the mishaps and things that are going on, but there is another part of the story. All right. This is the victory that overcomes the world.